Welcome back to the Photaudiography podcast. I'm your host Luke, and today I'll be talking all about focus. First, let me explain a little bit about what focus is relating to photography. Focus is a physical area that results in the clearest image when the subject is within that physical area. On disposable cameras, that do not have any focus or zoom capability, you may have seen instructions on the disposable camera to have your subject between 3 and 9 meters away from the camera. This is because the lens on the camera is set to have the subject to be in focus within that physical area of 3 to 9 meters. More advanced cameras with more advanced lenses allow the focus area to be changed for different situations. Autofocus is a great tool that is available where you specify a point on the camera's field of view and the lens will automatically focus on whatever is in that point. Autofocus has become more advanced over the years and continues to advance with new capabilities emerging with mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras allowing for new features. Next, I would like to talk a little bit about how autofocus works and give you a little bit of background on that. There are two main types of autofocus systems: phase detection and contrast detection. Phase detection is very fast and good at tracking moving subjects. Phase detection is prone to errors and internal alignment issues with the camera. However, some cameras let you calibrate the system to avoid these errors. Contrast detection autofocus is normally a little bit slower than phase detection autofocus because the camera must process more data. However, contrast detect autofocus is normally more accurate than phase detection when shooting still subjects. When shooting still subjects or moving subjects, there are autofocus settings you can change to assist you. Continuous servo is a focus setting that means that your camera continually adjusts focus whenever you hold down the focus button. Single servo is a focus setting that means once your camera focuses on the subject and locks in the focus, it does not continue searching for new focus point. There are many different types of ways to set up your autofocus points on your camera. I'm going to go over different ones you may come across on your camera. Single point autofocus is where the camera uses one focus point that the user chooses. Dynamic autofocus is similar to single point autofocus, where you select one point and the subject, if it happens to move into one of the nearby autofocus points, the camera will adjust and refocus. With 3D tracking autofocus, the camera will follow the subject as it moves across focus points around the frame. This mode is sometimes not as accurate as the dynamic autofocus, but can be useful for certain situations. Group area autofocus uses multiple focus points simultaneously and focuses on the object nearest to the camera within the group of points. Auto area autofocus is when the camera automatically scans the different focus points in the frame and decides what subject to focus on. Personally, I find auto area autofocus the most frustrating because often the camera does not properly decide what subject I want it to focus on. As you learn your camera and the different focus area modes that it offers, you will find which mode you prefer. I think it's time that I back up a minute and tell you how to use autofocus on your camera. Most cameras have you press the shutter button halfway in order to engage autofocus. Normally, focusing and taking the photo go hand in hand. However, there might be situations where you want focusing and taking the photo to be separate. You may have heard of back button autofocus. This is when you use the AF on button on the back of your camera to focus. This is especially helpful if you want to lock your focus across several photos. You can use the AF on button to focus. Another situation that is helpful for using back button focus is when you need to focus and then recompose your image. This is helpful if your camera does not have many focus points and you need to focus and recompose a lot. Most cameras today have many focus points, but older cameras do not have as many focus points as newer cameras. Also, unless you're using a mirrorless interchangeable lens camera, your camera may not have focus points toward the outer edges of the frame, so focus and recomposing is needed to focus on something toward the edge of the frame. Another use for back button focus is if you need to focus and then wait a while before taking a photo. If you have the shutter button as your autofocusing button for your shot, and you need to focus and then wait a while before taking a photo, when you press the shutter button, it will mess up the focus. Something else that is important to know is where to focus. You want to make sure you focus on your main subject. When you're photographing a person, you will typically want to focus on one of their eyes. The same is true for animals too if you're photographing wildlife or pets. However, if you are photographing something more abstract, you can choose what the focus point should be. Keep in mind that the sharpest objects in your photo are the ones that stand out to the viewer. Your depth of field will affect how much of your photo is in focus, which can help focus attention to the most important part of your photo, using a shallow depth of field to focus the viewer's attention on what is most important, or using a wider depth of field to give more focus to the overall scene. The last thing I would like to talk about is focus stacking. Focus stacking is a technique where you take several photos focused at different points and then combine the sharpest points of each photo together to create one completely in focus and sharp scene. This technique can be tricky, and I encourage you to read up on it or watch a video going more in depth about focus stacking, but I encourage you to experiment with this before watching any videos to try out focus stacking on one of your images, and then if you want to learn more, read up on it. My next podcast, I'm going to talk about how to take sharper photos, so stay tuned for that. I wanted to put that one out along with this focus one, so stay tuned for that. Alright, well I think that's enough bad advice I have for you for now, so I'll see you later, Shutterbugs.